In the deepest part of the sea stood the palace of the Sea King. And he had 6 daughters. They played in the garden all day long. Unlike the other princesses, the youngest was quiet and brooding. And her name was the Little Mermaid. Most of all, she loved listening to stories about the world of people. Traditionally, a mermaid could only rise to the surface for the first time in her 16th birthday. And now it's time to see the land and the youngest princess. She surfaced close to the ship, singing and music coming from the deck. This was the first time the princess saw the ship. In the cabin of the ship, the Little Mermaid noticed a handsome prince. For a long time she could not take her eyes off him. Suddenly, a violent storm began at sea. The prince's ship hit a rock and shattered into pieces. In complete darkness, lightning flashed, and the Little Mermaid saw the prince fall into the sea. She rescued him by bringing him ashore. Soon the prince was found by a girl passing by. When he woke up, he smiled at her and thanked her for saving her. The Little Mermaid became sad that the prince did not even know about her existence. She dived into the water and swam away. From her father's stories about people, the Little Mermaid knew that they considered the fishtail of mermaids to be ugly. Therefore, in order to please a person, one had to acquire 2 legs. The next day, the Little Mermaid went to the sea witch. The sorceress agreed to make a potion for her that would turn the fishtail into a pair of slender legs. The princess's gait would be graceful, but every step she took would bring unbearable pain. And if the prince married another, the Little Mermaid would turn into sea foam. In return, the witch wished to take her wonderful voice from the girl. The princess was ready for anything to be close to the prince, and she agreed. Having sailed to the prince's palace at night, the Little Mermaid drank a magic drink. A sharp pain shot through her and she passed out. Waking up in the afternoon, the girl saw the prince in front of her, and lowering her eyes, found 2 legs instead of a fishtail. The prince tried to find out who she was and how she got here, but the Little Mermaid could not speak. Despite her airy gait and beautiful dancing, she felt terrible pain in her legs. The prince became more and more attached to the Little Mermaid, but still treated her like a cute little child. It never entered his head to make her his wife. Once the prince admitted that his heart is occupied by the one who saved him long ago on the shore, and they are going to get married. The Little Mermaid was very upset, but could not tell him the truth. When it was time for the wedding, the prince invited the Little Mermaid to go with the newlyweds on a honeymoon trip. A luxurious honeymoon tent is spread out on the deck of the ship. The Little Mermaid had one last evening left to be with the one for whom she left her home, gave her wonderful voice and endured endless torment every day. But he didn't even notice them. When silence fell on the ship, the Little Mermaid sat on the deck and waited for the first rays of the sun. Suddenly, near the ship, she noticed her sisters. They tearfully asked the witch to help save the princess from death. The sorceress gave them a sharp knife, with which the Little Mermaid was to pierce the heart of the prince. A drop of his blood would turn her legs into a tail, and she could return to the sea. The Little Mermaid looked into the tent, and saw there a sleeping couple in love. She did not find the strength to take the prince's life, and threw the dagger into the sea. With grief, the Little Mermaid threw herself into the water. But the kindness of the princess melted the heart of the wicked witch. The sorceress cancelled her spell, and the Little Mermaid again had a fishtail instead of human legs.
Once upon a time, there was a little girl. Once her rich father married an evil stepmother. She settled in the house with her 2 daughters. Their faces were beautiful and white, but their hearts were evil and cruel. And then came a difficult time for the poor girl. From morning until late in the evening, they forced her to do dirty work, carry water, heat the stove, cook food, wash dishes, and do laundry. And besides, the half-sisters did their best to upset her as much as possible. They mocked her, poured peas and wheat into the ashes, and she had to sit and pick them out. In the evening, when she was tired of work, she had to go to bed not in bed, but on the floor, next to the stove. And because she was always in ash, dust, and dirty, the sisters called her Cinderella. But then it happened one day that the king started a feast, which was supposed to last for 3 whole days, and called all the beautiful girls of the country to the holiday so that his son could choose a bride for himself. When the 2 named sisters learned that they, too, could come to the feast, they instantly began to dress up and preen. Cinderella also wanted to go dancing, but her stepmother did not let her go, because she had no dress or shoes, and she was dirty. And then the evil stepmother poured a bowl of wheat into the ashes and said that if Cinderella collected it in 2 hours, then she could go with her sisters. Cinderella went out into the garden and cried. And then 2 white doves flew in, followed by a whole flock of different birds. They swooped down on the ash and began to peck, and so they chose all the grains in a bowl. In less than an hour, they finished their work, and everyone flew back. Cinderella brought a bowl to her stepmother, began to rejoice, thinking that she could go to the feast. But her stepmother would not let her in any way. She turned her back on Cinderella and hurried with her 2 daughters to the ball. When there was no one left at home, Cinderella sat down on the floor and cried with grief. And then 2 white doves flew in, followed by a whole flock of different birds, and they threw off their dress and shoes shiny and all in gold. She quickly put on this dress and came to the bride. They saw her stepsisters and stepmother and thought that it must be some strange princess, she was so beautiful in her golden dress. It never occurred to them that it was Cinderella. The prince came out to meet her, took her hand, and they began to dance. And he liked Cinderella so much that he did not want to dance with any other girl. She danced until the evening and wanted to return home, but the prince asked her to see her off. He wanted to know whose beautiful girl this is, and where she lives. But Cinderella ran away from him and climbed onto the dovecot. The prince ordered to destroy the dovecot, but there was no one in it. And nowhere near could he find his beautiful stranger. No one could have guessed that Cinderella was rescued by pigeons that took her home. The prince was upset and went to the palace with his head down. And suddenly he saw a shoe, lifted it up, it was so small and elegant and all of pure gold. The prince guessed that when Cinderella ran away from him, the shoe from her left foot remained on one of the steps. The prince was delighted, and ordered to find the mistress of this shoe, and to whom it suits he will marry that one. The parents returned from the ball. They saw that Cinderella was asleep in her shirt on ash, and a dim light was on by the stove. Both sisters went to their rooms, hoping that tomorrow they would be lucky enough to put on the golden slipper. The next day, the prince came to their house, and said that everyone who wants to try on the shoe of his future wife should come out. 2 sisters came out, and the stepmother locked Cinderella in the house and did not let her out. The older sister tried it on a small shoe. The younger sister tried it on the shoe as great. The prince was about to leave, but Cinderella climbed out of the window and ran out to him. And she put on a shoe, and it just fit her. The prince looked into her eyes and recognized in her the very beautiful girl with whom he danced. He took Cinderella, put her on a horse and rode off to play a wedding with her. And he ordered the sisters and stepmother to be locked in their house, and never let them out of there. This is how they were punished for their malice and deceit.